Hey everyone, welcome to our channel. I'm Carolyn, your Tranquil Mentor. Today we're going to be making a Valentine chunky yarn wreath with 2 candy cane wreath forms and 2 pool noodles from Dollar Tree. This was a request from one of our subscribers, Barbara, for a Christmas candy cane yarn wreath. And we're sorry for taking so long, but we didn't get this made for Christmas. So we decided we'd make this into a Valentine yarn wreath instead. I have 2 of the Christmas yarn wreath forms and got them around Christmas time and didn't get to the candy canes, the candy cane yarn wreaths. So what I'm doing here is I'm just holding them up and just sizing them up a bit and seeing how they're going to fit together. I've never done this before, so you're along for part of the process and really excited about how this is going to turn out. I got some pool noodles and I've got my cutters, and I'm going to be needing to do some wire cutting. And the zip ties, also from Dollar Tree, are to hold the pool noodle onto the wreath form. And since they are going to be opposite images, they're going to, one side's going to be the wire frame on the facing up, and then the other side will be the pool noodle will be facing up, so they'll be in a way opposite. And I'm just gonna hold this pool noodle into shape here, and I'm using the zip ties to secure that pool noodle to the wreath frame. And sorry for being a little bit out of camera here, but it's a bit awkward to handle. And as I get a couple of these on, it should be okay. It's kind of like you need a third hand in there to hold that down. But I'm sure that there's other ways to do it. And what I could have done is, where I have my hand right now, I could have just put a zip tie there, and that would have held the pool noodle in place, so I wouldn't have had to keep my elbow down on it and try to put the zip ties together. But what I'm doing is I'm taking the zip ties right now to what I think is probably going to be the back. Not positive, I can always twist them around later, but I'm looking for a few more of my zip ties. They are close by. I'm gonna try to stay, where the wire is going across. I'm trying to stay on those areas there to give my zip ties a little bit more stability. I do, when I was working on this, I do have some trouble with knowing which side the zipper part is on, the little rough side, and sometimes I get them on there and then it's the wrong way, but I just usually flip them around. They're fairly easy to do, and just getting them secure would have helped me a lot. But here I am now by that other cross wire there and trying to use that wire for some stability. And then what I'm doing too is I'm alternating. One of the zip ties is on the wire side, and then when I go to the next one, I go to the outside out and the outside area. And here it is done with all the zip ties on. You can see that I alternated back and forth. Now some of them I didn't, but as I went along, I just took a look to see what would keep it more stable. And then I'm cutting those extra little tags off there, the extra little pieces. We're not going to need this extra pool noodle that's sticking out, so we can cut those off at the end. And I don't think it would have been a problem to leave it on at this point, but just to try to get an idea of what how everything's going to look. But I'm using my knife that I had. It's an old cake knife, and it's in my arsenal of tools, my craft tools, and I don't use it for anything else. Cake again, I just use it for crafting, and it cuts foam really well. So I'm sizing this project up here and taking a look at it, and you'll see that I have one has the wire side is facing up. They have to be a mirror image of each other because they're both candy canes, you know, they're the same. So you'll see that white side of the pool noodle up on the opposite side there, if that makes any sense. But I'm showing you more so than I'm explaining it to you because it's a little bit hard to explain. But here, off camera, what I did was I cut an angle there, and it's about, I went 1 inch up and then I cut at an angle to the pool noodle, and then I took my wire cutters and I trimmed that on an angle. That little piece that you see, the little zip tie that's at the ends there, I put them on for later. I thought I was going to wrap first, one side separately and then the other side, one red, one white, and I don't end up using those later. But here I'm just pushing it together to get an idea if my angle's right. And I tried using these zip ties and I had to add an extra one, and it just got to where it wasn't going to work. So what I decided to do was take those off, not use them. And I, as you can see, off camera, I duct taped, and I had to get some help, you know, hold the wreath up while I was duct taping it. You know, I did it off camera, but anyway, you see what it looks like. You just reinforce it and wrap it together. Sometimes, you know, you just need an extra little hand to hold on to everything. And I made my little V at the bottom there. This is some burgundy chunky yarn that I got from Michael's, and it was around Christmas time. But I looked the other day and they still had the burgundy. And so what I'm going to do, one side's going to be red, one side's going to be white. So I'm just taking a look here of how I'm going to tie on. And I'm going to start tying on from the back of the wreath. And then all of the nice even work will be on the front. And then anything like this will be on the back. So I have my finger protectors on because I'm going to be doing a lot of hot gluing, so I want to make sure I don't get burned. And I also put my glue gun on low temp because of the foam. Now the duct tape's not a problem. It's just slippery. So I had to put a lot of hot glue down there on the bottom there in that corner. And here what I'm doing is I'm just getting everything started, and I love the feel of this yarn. I mean, it's just so soft and cozy, and it makes you feel really good. You know, it's nice to handle because some yarn's just not, but it's, you know, very thick and very forgiving. And, you know, it's the first time I've ever done anything with it, and I can think of a ton of other projects now that I've got a handle on it. And as I go along here, I'm just securing this at the end, and I'm going to take that whole ball of yarn and pass it through the heart each time. I don't have to do that, but I'll push these pieces together here, hot glue them into place so that they stay good, and I don't have to, you know, I'll push them close together here. But this way I don't have to keep going back and pushing this into place. I have a really good secure spot for everything to stay into place down the road later on. With the windiness that we have in Florida sometimes, you wouldn't think so, but we do. You know, that part will be banging on the door. And, you know, it could get caught in the wind and everything. And I just want to make sure that it stays and it keeps together. Maybe less yarn could be used or less hot glue. I don't know. I just really like the way that this comes out, you know, the way that it looks when it's glued tightly in this corner piece here. And you know, it is slippery, so there'll be a lot more glue in this area with the duct tape. And I'm putting a spot of glue at the very beginning here, and then as I get further away from myself, I'll put another one. The wire is under there too, so I have to make sure that I pass that. You know, so far it's looking really good, and it's going where I'm placing it and where I'm gluing it, and I'm not having any trouble with the low temp glue on to the duct tape or the foam. So sometimes it just puts a pretty big hole in there, but the low temp seems to help that out a lot. And then what I'll do is I get this secured. I'm just going to wrap all the way, and maybe about 5 or 6 strands loops later, I'll put a bead of hot glue at the, you know, front and the back, and then I'll wrap again maybe 5 or 6 more times to keep it in place that way and push it close together as I go along. What that'll do too is it won't be so much hot gluing, and I'll be able to enjoy the process of putting this together, and you know, the softness of the yarn and the gratification of the project when it's done. You know, this is probably a good time to just sit back and listen to some music, you know, anything that you like, jazz, Bob Seger, you know, soft rock, anything like that. Or if you like crazy rock music or anything like that, it would be a good time. Or TV, your favorite show or something. And what I did was I spared you the time of watching me go through that. And hot glued up in that corner turn there that at the top of the candy cane. And then here I stopped because I wanted to show how I was going to work into this corner here, and then eventually making my color change into that white yarn. So I'm wrapping around, and I'm still passing through that great big ball of yarn. There's plenty of room to pass it through. I could have cut the pieces had I, you know, known how much I was going to use, but for some reason I just didn't. I felt like it would be better if I had a straight run here of yarn, but I'm sure it probably really wouldn't have mattered. I could have just tied it in the back and moved along, but that was just what I chose to do. And you know, not everybody has to do it that way. It might be easier just to cut it into pieces and pass it through. It did start coming apart on me a little bit towards the end, and I was just balling it back up and just wrapping it back up and passing it back through, and it seemed to work out really good. And you know, we're in a slippery area right now too with that duct tape, so I'm using a lot more glue, and you know, than I did when I was wrapping the previous part. Following along, I've got my finger protectors on, passing that yarn through, taking away my little threads there, my little spider webs that are coming from the glue. And I'll pull them all off later too. I did a lot along the way, but after I'll pull, you know, a lot of that extra off. And then right at the tip here, I want to make sure I reinforce that and, you know, push that over. Hold on to that for a little bit so that it's right at the peak, and then just for good measure I'll wrap around a little bit more and, you know, see if I can get that not to separate. But that was the big thing too. I made sure that I was actually wrapping and gluing as the wreath was facing me, and then as it was time to tie off, I did the tying off of the burgundy yarn with the wreath faced to the back. So you'll see some of the little zip ties are showing through a little bit. And I didn't bother painting them or covering them up or anything because they are on the back. You know, if it really was something that really bothered you, you can always paint them a little bit or put a little bit of fuzzies over them or something. You know, cut up a little bit of fuzzies and and just glue them into place. But I'm cutting that off. I just glued it down. And then we'll be making the transition to the white yarn, and that is also from Michaels. It's white chunky yarn, and it is called Winter White. And I think I show this to you upside down, but what it does say on the package is Winter White. And they still had it when I went in the other day, and it's before February. So right before February. So they still had it, the burgundy and the Winter White chunky yarn. So that was a good sign. The red was just, red was just really impossible to find. I looked everywhere, looked online, and they just didn't have it. I used the burgundy, and I really liked the way that it turned out. I wouldn't have normally picked that, but I'm really glad that I did. And sometimes, you go on the availability of what you have, and, you improvise and make it work from your original thought, process of everything. And that's how things get made. You improvise and work with, if you don't have something and you can't find it, you try to think of other ways to do it and make it happen. And then in that time of doing that, you discover something new. So I've knotted that off. I decided to start down at the bottom of the peak. I just figured I could keep my yarn a little bit thinner at that peak. And then at the top peak of the heart, I would put a very big bow. And, because that'll probably be a little bit bulky up top there. So I'm trying to keep this kind of thin down at the bottom so I don't have to hide it when I'm done. This, of course, is, as we said, this is on the back. So I'm gluing that down, turning my wreath over so I can have a good view of what it's going to look like on the front. And we'll just take a couple of those other extra yarn pieces out. And then I've got my big ball of yarn again, and I'm starting to hot glue at that end piece there. And then I'll pass that over and then just give that a good holding. Let that dry. And then at this edge here, we'll put a ball of glue on there. And there's the wire too is under there. So I glued a lot onto the duct tape, but where the wire is. And that seemed to hold that yarn on quite a bit. So that was good. But this yarn too, the white, of course, is the same softness, and it's just very forgiving and very comfortable to work with and soothing. And it just reminds me of winter. Here in Florida, we don't have winter. We don't really want a winter, but sometimes you miss the things like a cozy sweater, or a cozy heavy blanket or something. And this really feels like that. And it makes me feel kind of like wintry, so to speak. But I don't want the snow. But anyway, it's nice to visit snow, but I don't want to live in it anymore. But I like my sunshine. These, things just make you feel like home. Sorry about my head. I was just trying to get a good view. I didn't mean to stick it in there. Overall, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish winding this up. We're going to cover over this duct tape because that's kind of the tricky parts. I'll finish as I was doing before, winding that through. Not really giving it a cut yet. It does get tricky at sometimes too because the whole ball just likes to fall apart. It didn't really come to where I could just pull one piece out. It just seemed like it got to a certain point and the ball would just fall apart. And I just, like I said, wound it back up again and it was fine. Very, overall a very easy project to do. You want to make sure that you are relaxing while you do it and that you're, listening to some nice music and watching your favorite show or something like that. Our crafting is supposed to make us feel good. And I've wrapped all the way up, and I just moved forward in the video so that you could see this part where I'm finishing up the wrapping here. And I'm at this point that I wasn't really sure how I was going to handle it. So I knew I had to cover all of the duct tape and get to a certain point here, but in order to cover it, I did have to get it a little bulky, so that I had anticipated was going to happen. I knew somewhere it was going to happen because it was going to overlap. And here's where we do get a little bit tangled and stuff, and I'm just going with it, kind of pulling it through and, you know, working with it. And it's just, you can see that there's that little white spot left over there in the duct tape. Some of the red fuzzies did get over the white, and it didn't stick or anything. I just pulled it all off, and it's not really messy, but you'll find little fuzzies around, and you just pull them off, and that's it. You'll find them on your working, you know, desktop or whatever where you're working, and you just clean them up, and it doesn't shed nearly as what I thought it was going to do. It's very little, very minimal. And here we are wrapping. Probably could have stopped around here. I guess I feel that there's some kind of little bald spot or something. So I'm going to get that point and hold on to that. And this is where we're getting to the point where we'll be finishing this off. I'm just going to pull straight here a little bit and kind of pull it a bit tight. I'm losing my finger protectors here. All right. And I'm just wrapping a little bit further. And what we'll do is we'll pull, you know, each time pull tighter so we get that flatness there. You know, I have a little bit more detangling to do, and I'm working on that. We'll just get our pieces through, and yeah, and you see how the ball is just loosely falling apart. All right, and I think we're about there. I'm gonna just cover up that little hole there and get that glued. I'll glue that down, and I actually committed to ending the winter white yarn. So we have a little hole there. We'll try to press that in and keep it flat. You know, make sure that the glue is dry so that's held down really well. With the finger protectors, I'm just having a little bit of trouble trying to tie this off here. And really, I'm just going to make a couple overhand knots just to get that secure enough so I know that it's not going to come loose. So I'll do a couple of them. I just pulled through the one loop, and then I'll make a couple more and then wrap around again and pull that tight. And then I flatten it as much as I can, push down, and another cutting and a commitment to cutting. Here we go. We're going to take that, push it as flat as we can. We've got some hot glue in there. We'll push that down even further and just hold on to it. And that looks nice and secure. So everything is wrapped. Oh, I got a little thing. I'll just take an extra little piece and we'll wrap that up. And I do have a bow that I'm putting on this. And the bow footage was corrupted. So I'm at this step here. And what I've done so far is I have some satin ribbon. It's Ofray ribbon that was originally white. I got that from Joann's when it was on sale. And what I did was I took alcohol-based ink that I used for my resin, and I dyed the ribbon because I wanted this color pink. I mean, I just, knew it was going to be perfect. and I couldn't visualize anything else. So to save money, it really helps me to have this ribbon on hand. I can do other things with it. I've painted it in the past with fabric paint, but I just liked how this came out. It is messy to dye it, but you know, you wear gloves and you work in a space that you can clean up pretty easily. And I got a couple loops in a stack here. I've got 2 loops of the satin, and then I've got 2 loops of that burlappy linen-y heart ribbon. And right now what I'm doing is I'm creating like a little sandwich stack. I'm making my tails, so I'm gonna make sure those are even, and I'm gonna put them all in a stack here and line everything up. I'm gonna find the center, and then this way when I have my little fold, that's why I love wired ribbon, working with the wired. The Ofray ribbon's not very wired, but it's okay. You know, what's great about it, it's affordable and you can get the color that you want as long as you have that color dye or paint or fabric paint. And then I'll line everything up with my tails in this nice little sandwich. And then I'm going to take one of my trusty zip ties here. And again, with me, sometimes I just can't seem to find which side to use. I end up having to reposition it all over again. But that's just something, you know, I'm not a real champion bow maker. I get by as good as I can. When I zip this together here, I'm checking it and making sure again that I'm aligned in the center. And I'm going to zip tie it, not make a total commitment yet. As my zip tie is a little bit looser, I can still center my ribbons a little bit more. And then as I can go along and I feel that they're centered, then I can tighten that zip tie. And right here, I'm going to do some dovetails. Fold it in half and then cut on that one side into a V there. And then the same thing on the other side, fold it in half and then cut into an angle and then fold in half and cut that into an angle. And then we have some dovetails. And I probably missed a little bit here. Yeah, sometimes I miss. That tail right there is a little bit longer. Let me shorten that up a little bit. And there we go. I mean, they could be the same length or they could be shorter. Sometimes people like to make them a little bit shorter than the underneath ribbon. I'll have them the same. And we're just going to fluff and pull it, and that zip ties on really tight. So I'm going to handle it a little bit and I'm going to get it where I want it. And I'm going to get it fluffed up. You know, you don't want to pull like crazy, but you know, you get that centerpiece really, really tight. And then that way you can manipulate it. And sometimes with the way that I do these bows, it will get, the tails will stick out a little bit, but eventually I can get them to pull down. And then I do a lot of fluffing. I mean, there's just lots of fluffing. And then once I get it on there, then I do a lot more fluffing. Then once I hang it up, I do a lot more fluffing. But here, this, I ended up actually going with the XO ribbons from Michaels. They're a lot wider. I can't remember what the dimension of it is, but I think it's probably 2-inch ribbon. And you'll see it at the end when I show the final wreath. But I ended up putting 2 more loops of that XO ribbon, and then and 2 more tails, like another tail. And you don't see that footage here, but I opened up the zip tie and I was able to, since nothing was cut, I was able to put that XO ribbon in and make this ribbon a lot larger, because the wreath is very big and it just needed something substantial. So that extra ribbon and tails really made a huge difference. But here's the smaller bow, and you know how that turned out. And here we have it. I found that you and me sign on a heart sign at Dollar Tree, and I took that apart. I just loved the way that looked. And here you can see the X and O ribbons, and you know, as I said too, those are from Michael's, and huge sale for those ribbons and the heart ribbons too. And the satin looks a little bit purpley here, but it's not. It's a nice pink. And I just love the way that this turned out. I mean, it's just soft and comforting looking, and it looks so pretty on the door, and you can really see it from the street. It's something of some size. And before I had something pretty small on there, and you really couldn't see it. And I just thinks that, you know, this makes a nice statement. I'm very excited, and I just thank you so very much for watching, and I hope that you make a wreath like this for yourself. And if you do, please tag me on Instagram. It's at tranquilmentor.com. And I appreciate so very much for watching my video today, and I will see you in the next one.